The following program is the work of broadcast students from the British Columbia Institute of Technology. BCIT Magazine features news stories from around the Lower Mainland over the past week. Responsibility for the content of the show rests completely with the students and their BCIT instructors.
Coming up on BCIT Magazine, First Nations veterans are recognized during a rally in downtown Vancouver.
Air care tests may continue despite more efficient vehicles hitting the roads.
And a Vancouver landmark and heritage building gets a federally funded makeover.
Hi, and welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Keanan Kipp.
And I'm Sam Numsen. Aboriginals who served in Canada's armed forces were honored earlier this week during a march in downtown Vancouver. As Allison Riley finds out, past and present soldiers from around the country came together to mark First Nations Veterans Day.
To commemorate National First Nations Veterans Day, past and present veterans are gathering for a march in downtown Vancouver. They are joined by other First Nations and supporters, along with members of the Chinese Veterans Association.
This march was come together in 2005 because at that time there wasn't much happening here in Vancouver on Aboriginal Veterans Day, and we needed to remember our veterans who served.
The group met here at the corner of Main and Hastings.
It's here in this building in the 1930s that the Native Brotherhood met. It was the first ever political group dedicated to Native rights.
The march travels down Hastings Street and finishes at Victory Square. The Salish national anthem is sung along with the Salish prayer for peace. The drumming comes to a stop and a moment of silence is observed.
I've done the November 11th things. I tend to just do the Aboriginal Veterans one. This is the 6th year that I've done it since I moved up here. We get our elders talking, we get people talking and sharing songs, and it feels safer anyway.
Wreaths are then placed at the foot of the Victory Square Veterans Memorial by veterans, community leaders, and politicians.
During the First and Second World Wars, First Nations people were forced to give up their Indian status to join the armed forces. At least 3,000 did join, including 72 women. Allison Riley in Vancouver for BCIT Magazine.
An artifact that was to play a major role in a Remembrance Day parade has been stolen. We go now to Allison Riley, who's been following the story. Allison, what can you tell us so far?
Yes, Sam, the Seaforth Highlanders are begging for the return of their ceremonial mace. It was given to them by their Scottish counterparts in 1910. It was in the drum major's car when the vehicle was stolen in New Westminster last month. Sam.
Allison, what's the significance of the mace for the regiment?
Well, Sam, the drum major carries the mace and uses it to direct the drum and pipe bands during parades. It was also carried by the regiment during the Second and First World Wars. The regiment is now pleading to the thief to have a conscience and to return the mace in time for Remembrance Day ceremonies. Back to you in studio.
With all of the focus on remembering our veterans, it's hard not to think about our troops that are still overseas. NDP leader Jack Layton was downtown Vancouver speaking to the public about the federal government's decision to keep soldiers in Afghanistan for combat training.
The Liberals and Conservatives have it wrong. The Canadian people have it right. It's time to bring our troops home, take care of them when they get here, and play a completely different role in Afghanistan in the future.
Layton also says that our involvement overseas should play up on our strengths and focus more on humanitarian aid.
A review committee in the Lower Fraser Valley is looking to extend the much-debated air care program. Reporter Jen Zielinski finds out why these tests may continue.
The air care program may be renewed despite all the newer, cleaner cars on the road. The Air Care Review Committee says the air quality benefits justify the tests, so drivers could be air carrying their vehicles until 2020.
Most of the cars are in a 20-year model span. Now, the oldest cars have the highest likelihood of something going wrong with them and having high emissions. That's just because they were dirtier to start with, and they've been on the road for 20 years. They have a lot of miles on them, a lot of wear and tear, and they're likely to have high emissions. Now consider that 2010 car 20 years from now. Even though that starts off as a really clean, efficient car, by the time it gets to be 20 years old, maybe it has 350,000 kilometers of use on it. If you haven't done the maintenance to it to keep the emission control systems all working, it's not going to be as clean as it was when it first came out.
The cost of running the Air Care program depends entirely on fees from motorists, not on TransLink or the government. Most cars that are tested are charged $45 every 2 years. If the car fails an inspection, it could cost up to $400 to fix. And some motorists don't think it's worth it.
Well, I think it's a waste of time. I've passed every time I've been here. I have a fairly new car. Well, I guess not anymore. It's a 2001. But no, I look at some of the cars that have passed and they're spewing crap out of the back. I think it's a waste of time. It's a money grab. I don't think it's worthwhile.
It's not bad since it is good to keep the air as good as we can get it, because it will affect us in the future, right? So yeah, I don't mind it at all. I mean, as long as you get your car running right, then you should be fine. You should have no problem.
We are in BC, British Columbia. Some other province, they don't have air care. Get rid of it.
According to the Air Care review, termination of the program would mean increased emissions and negative health impacts.
Having a program like this to help people or make that decision for people to spend money on emission control components, that's where it comes in.
The Air Care program started back in 1992 as a way to improve the region's air quality. Over 15 million vehicles have been inspected since that time, and just under 1 million have failed. So if your vehicle is 8 years or older, it's time to get it air cared. Jen Zielinski in Vancouver for BCIT Magazine.
For years, Pacific Central Station has been what many people visiting Vancouver see first. As my co-anchor Sam Numsen discovered, the building will soon look like new again thanks to recently announced federal funding.
At almost 100 years old, the Pacific Central Station stands as a symbol of Canada's rail system. Come next year, the aged building will be made over. Ottawa announced a $5.1 million investment to revamp the Heritage Station, a joint effort by the Feds and Via Rail.
It is really a proud day for Canada and the Canadian government when we are here this morning to announce a $5.1 million major renovation and upgrade to this station.
The station's facade shows signs of its age, decayed and discolored. Merrifield says the renovations will ensure a viable future for the building and the passengers who travel through it.
Like I say, this station and this renovation not only preserves that history but also preserves the functionality of this facility for the people in this area.
Vancouver Mayor Gregor Robertson echoes that sentiment.
This is a historic building. It is a great heritage building here with the 91-year history. I want to just express real gratitude for recognizing the importance of improving these historic buildings.
The money comes from Canada's Economic Action Plan, a small slice of the almost $1 billion of federal money being spent Canada-wide on rail improvements. Renovations on the station's masonry, roof, and windows is expected to be completed early 2011. This after an assessment of the decay is completed and the job is contracted out. Sam Numsen in Vancouver for BCIT Magazine. Coming up after the break on BCIT Magazine, an education program for students may end because they're not getting enough money.
And Friends of Hastings Park plant trees in an effort to increase green space.